Okay, perfect. It's recording. I'm great. Are you excited?
I am very excited. Very excited.
Is that your painting in the background, like a life-size one, or?
That is my daughter's incorporated as a Zoom background for me, but it's a painting that I did back in 1989 of Davey Allison and his Haviland Motorsports Ford.
What made you want to paint him specifically?
He was one of my favorite drivers, all-time favorite driver.
Has he seen that painting?
He did. We took it to, my dad and I took it to an autograph session. It was in 1989, I believe it had to be 89, July of 89. And he signed it. And one of the corporate folks from Haviland was there at the session. I believe it was like an AutoZone type of shop. And he asked me for it. He liked it so much. And I gave it to him, of course. And now I really, really wished I had it, but it was, all in good time. And he, in return, gave me this jacket. I don't know if you could see it on Zoom, but I still have it. It's Haviland racing jacket. I still Haviland, Texaco Haviland.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I still have it and I cherish it. And the racing world lost a very, very good, talented driver. When we lost Davey Allison, it was a very sad day.
That's really sad.
Mm-hmm.
We could meet him, like do an interview with him too. That would be nice.
Absolutely. He was so, I remember the autograph session like it was today, and he was so easy to talk to. He was there with Liz Allison. Well, she wasn't Liz Allison then. At least I don't believe so, but he was just as friendly. You could talk to him, as was his father, Bobby. I remember meeting his father, Bobby Allison, at church. He would come with his family, his wife, to the Saturday Eve Mass at St. Paul's Catholic Church, where I attended with my family. And I remember speaking to him. And again, just like he was just your next door neighbor you knew all your life. Very good, humble, good Christian people.
Oh, that's sweet. Well, the first question I'll get into is, what was your introduction to motorsports?
My dad. Oh my goodness. That was one thing that we always did as a family. He and his parents, my grandparents, and his brother moved here from Cleveland, Ohio in the early 60s. And they moved because they were part of the Nelson Stacy race team. They knew them very well. And Nelson Stacy moved his team here to Florida, Daytona Beach. And so he followed. He still wanted to keep in the action. And of course, why not Daytona Beach, the world center of racing? And that I just listened to all his stories and went to the track with him growing up. So that's how I got started, and I got sucked right in.
What was your first show you've seen, if you did see a racing show?
The first race I attended was, I believe it was one of the ARCA races, because we went in the infield, so I got to sit in the car. I probably was about maybe 5 or 6 years old. So I guess I couldn't get in too much trouble sitting in a car watching a race in the infield. But I think that was one of mine. It had to be in the early 70s.
Oh, wow, 70s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like way before Brian was thought of.
Was that painting at the Daytona Speedway? Like, is that where it's located, or is that a different?
Yep, when I used to paint the portraits of the drivers, I would always use the Daytona backdrop, the Speedway. That was just one of my favorite places to be. And as you could tell now, looking at the Speedway, it's changed a lot.
Oh.
That is a non-existent backdrop now. It looks a little Walt Disney-ish, kind of, to my own opinion. It's just exploded, the way that you look at the scene now compared to the way it used to be.
I found out this gimmick they did with the seats. They would color it like rainbow, like the seats, so it looks like there's people in there no matter what it is. So when you're overhead, like far away, it looks like there's still people in the crowd when it's just the seats.
Yes, I remember the first time I saw that, I was thinking, what an awesome marketing idea, because it always looks, your stands can be half empty, but it always looks like they're full. But at Daytona, they're always full anyway, so.
Of course.
Hmm.
My second question is, do you remember the first race you attended? I believe you discussed this briefly already, but we can
Yeah.
go in.
Yes, it was the ARC, one of the ARCA races, and prior to that and ongoing, before the track got to its status, I guess now with the different, and it probably has a lot to do with security. We would always go to open practice sessions, like in this winter time when the season was on hiatus. They were kind of after winter break. They would have 1 week of Ford practice, 1 week of Chevy practice, and so on and so forth. And we would always go, and you get in for free. You sit in the grant. They had a designated area, and we would always go. And my dad and I would bring our little stopwatches, and we'd, clock the cars going around, and it was a lot of fun.
That's so cute.
Mhm.
You still do that with Venerina, your daughter?
Unfortunately, I can't get her interested. I can't. It's yeah. It's a different sport now than it was back in the 80s, I believe. The onset of, to me personally, the onset of restrictor plate racing kind of ruined it. It took I don't know, I don't know what word I'm looking for, but it kind of just changed it. It took um, the excitement out of it. When you see like Bill Elliott, I saw him go over 200 and I say 200 and goodness, I don't even remember it was way over, it was over 200 miles an hour. And then you see them can't pass each other at 186. It kind of, it just takes that umph out of it. So, but it's still an amazing motorsport. And I'm glad it still has the popularity that it has.
I was speaking with Buzz McKim, your little friend, a while ago about this, and he says, I
Yes.
was shocked if they start using Teslas in the race, because that's like the future now.
That would be interesting. That would change it up a little bit. Instead of have, normal pit stops and tire changes, they're gonna have to, plug them into the electric chargers.
I was gonna say, could you get disqualified if the car is driving itself? Like,
Oh yeah. You see all the drivers up in the stands with their remote controls trying to get them to hit the high banks at 200.
like an RC car?
Yes.
Well, my next question will be, what are some of your fondest memories from Daytona Speed Weeks?
I think one of my fondest, probably I have two. One, we were at one of those open practice sessions, and it was late in the, oh my goodness, are you there? I'm sorry. I just got low battery notification. My dad and I were at the stands. There was always a group that would all, and my dad would talk to them, and they were kind of regulars that always would go to practice the practice sessions. And we were kind of sitting there, and the David Pearson team arrived early for the next day's practice. So David and his son Eddie and some of their crew just walked in like regular people, and they were sitting up in the stands, and I think we about wet our pants. We were just like, oh my gosh, is that David Pearson? And I was probably late teens, and I saw Eddie Pearson, and he was a very nice looking man, and I was like, oh my gosh. And it was you could, again, just such down to earth people. You could talk to them like they were your best friend. And they stopped and they chit chatted us for a few minutes. And I know David Pearson was my father's all-time favorite. I have to say, he has to be I knew he was my father's all-time favorite, and I know he was just ecstatic. But that was probably my top most memorable. And the second would be when I was going to college at DBCC back then and UCF to be a teacher. At UCF, I took my junior intern kindergarten students on a field trip, and we went to the practice before the Daytona 500. And this would have been in 1989. And there was a crash during that time with Dale Earnhardt. And I remember all the little kindergartners were getting so excited. But that was a memorable experience.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
My next question would be, what are your feelings when you're at the races?
Oh my goodness. There's so many emotions because it kind of hits all your senses. I mean, the excitement, of course, and then you have the smell. There's a smell of the burning rubber as you know the tires are heating up going around the track. And then especially before the start of a race when you're in the grandstand and all the cars are rumbling by and it's like it's you know when you're in your car and you put your bass up real high and you put the sound up real high and it's like
Oh
you're
yeah.
inside the vehicle. It's kind of like that times 10. It's pretty amazing. So it kind of hits all your senses, and it's a really neat experience. Real neat experience.
That's
And it's always fun to watch. You could tell who the newbies are that have really never been to the track before because they walk up close to the fence before the cars are going to come by, and you're watching them in astonishment, and then the car goes by and their hat flies off and they're just like, oh my gosh, what just happened? It's you could always tell who's never been to the track before.
I'd freak out. That was me.
It
Have
was,
fly off.
yeah. I don't know if now with the new protocols at the speedway, since they did all the the renovations, if you're allowed to get that close to the fence. But before, literally, you could like hang on the fence. You could like right there. And this was in the 80s. And yeah, you would be the newbies hanging on the fence looking for the car to come around, and then here comes the car, and it was pretty cool.
Oh, that
And
is
we'd be pointing and laughing.
that is cool. My next question will be, did you have a favorite driver you rooted for? I believe you have him in your background.
Yes, Davey was my all-time favorite. And then, of course, Bill Elliott. I loved Bill Elliott. So it was Davey and Bill. My dad was Ford. I mean, my dad would be sick if a Ford didn't win. So I kind of grew up in that, Ford, rather, push a Ford than drive a Chevy. So I was a Ford fan. And so Bill Elliott was like the top Ford driver back then. And he was a good old Bill from Dawsonville.
Have you met Bill?
Briefly, I did get his autograph. Just a very quick. He signed the painting. I also have a painting that I did of him, and he signed that. And so that was a nice experience.
Oh, that's so cool. You have it still, the painting of him?
I don't. What I would do back then is I would go ahead and if someone showed interest, like they wanted, I would actually sell the paintings. And I have a neighbor that actually has that painting. Whenever I see her, she always reminds me, I still have your Bill Elliott painting hanging in my den.
Yeah, that's good. It's in a good home.
It is. And when you're a teenager, every penny counts.
Oh, it's true. I can relate. My next question will be, could you tell me about your father, William Franchina, and his love for the sport? You already said he was a Ford supporter.
Yes. Growing up in Cleveland, he was right there with the automakers, and they would go up and watch the cars come in from the boats. And he just had a overwhelming desire for automobiles and cars, and just that flowed right into racing. And he would go to all the short tracks back then. He and his family would hop in the car. I learned my first car that I learned to drive was a 57 Chevy. So he was always into the classics, and he would just that was his life. He really, really loved it. And that's how I got into it. But he followed, as I said earlier, Nelson Stacy and Marvin Panch. They were all here in Daytona. And he would do what they would call the pure oil trial testing. And they would get in street cars, I believe, and they would just practice them. They would take them around the racetrack to put miles on them. And they don't do anything like that anymore, of course, but it was something that it was fun because he got to get on the track. And I remember him always telling you have to maintain, I believe it was at least 100 miles an hour, or the banks of the Daytona, the Speedway, if you didn't maintain, I want to say it was 100, then you couldn't get up on the bank, you would slide down. So he got to drive the track like that. And he would just, every race he can go to, he would. And then when I was born, he kind of just kept it local. They didn't travel to other tracks anymore. And he was a good dad. He took very good care of me with his parents, and we would go to the races, and it was good. I have very good fond memories. I thank God for that.
Did his parents have any influence with his love for driving, or was it just him that started it?
His father was also a big fan of the sport. My grandfather Sam, and then his brother Donnie. They all loved it. I have pictures of them when they were young with their next to their Nelson Stacy cars, and they would get a regular car and they would put the stickers on the car, the decals, so
Yeah.
that their car looked like the race car. And because back then you could really buy a vehicle out of the showroom that really looked like the cars that they were racing in the track. And so they would have like a matching car, and it was pretty. And my grandmother, who was my mom, I loved her as a mother. She would do the cooking, so I remember fond memories of her. They would always talk about the fried chicken she would make, because she would cook some fried chicken before they went on their racing excursions, and so they would always bring packed lunches and picnic lunches when they went track to track. So
That's adorable. My next question will be, tell me about you and your family's relationship with Buzz McKim.
I'm not 100% sure how my dad met Buzz. I want to think it was probably through, I know it was through the Speedway somehow, but he became, oh goodness, a best friend right away. I know my dad was always at Buzz's house, and they were watching racing movies. And back in the day, before ESPN and Fox Sports, there were very few TV channels and radio stations that broadcast the races. So this is going to sound very odd, but what we would do is, if there was say the Talladega 500 was going to be on TV, and our local channel 2, 6, or 9 didn't carry it, well, my dad would find out where it was being carried, if it was like in Orlando or Jacksonville. And we would actually drive to, say, Jacksonville, and sit in a Kmart in their area where they sold TVs, because that was where the race was. It was in that area on that network, and we would sit there in the Kmart watching the race. And those are some fun, interesting memories, because you get kind of looked at weird when you're sitting in a Kmart watching the television for like 2 hours. But that was some interesting. So, but then as time went on, Buzz had some of the channels, the racing channels, that my dad didn't. And so they would get together. I remember Buzz calling him like at 10 o'clock at night, hey, come over, such and such a race is on. And so my dad would, go over. So they were very, very, very close. And and Buzz, being such a phenomenal artist, he was my inspiration. When I was growing up, I saw some of the pieces of artwork that he did. He would airbrush, like, amazing, and just he would do portraits and just everything. And he was my inspiration. I said, I want to be like him one day. So I tried very hard to pick up that talent.
I remember speaking with him, and I said, what type of art style do you have? I wanted to see. And he's like, oh, I love detail. Like, if you look at my paintings, I do every shine and like nick inside, like the bolt of the tire, like whatever. I'm gonna go to the sports car like vocabulary, but whatever the thing is in the middle of the tire, he's like, I can do all of that. Like, that's amazing.
Well, that's similar to your detail, because I saw some of your artwork, those Pokemon, and you do every little highlight, and you do the shading. So I see a lot of talent right there.
I learned from Buzz. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And my last question is, in your opinion, what does it look like, or what does it mean to be a motorsports fan?
Ooh, to be a motorsports fan, you have to be able to revel in the victory and be ready to cry in the agony of defeat. Because you'll have those days when your guy wins, and you'll have those days when somebody wrecks your guy on the last lap going to the finish line, and you just want to just punch that person in the nose, and you can't. I remember my daughter this past semester at Daytona State, she had a speech class, and I was telling her about my speech class that I did back in the 80s at Daytona at DBCC then, and we had to write a persuasive speech, and we had to do like a petition. And I remember distinctly that I gave my speech on Dale Earnhardt and how people should ban buying Wrangler jeans, because Wrangler was his sponsor at that time. And I did this whole dissertation about how he was going to the last lap, and he was, it probably had to be Bill Elliott back then, if I remember right. But they were going to the last lap, and he wrecked them. And so Bill Elliott didn't win, and it was because of Dale Earnhardt, and nobody should wear Wrangler jeans because Dale Earnhardt is a bad driver because he wrecks people on purpose, and yada, yada, yada. And I was very passionate about NASCAR back then. And I remember putting a petition in the class, having them sign it with my speech so that I could send to Wrangler so that they would drop him as a sponsor.
Well, it works. I don't know anyone else who wears Wrangler nowadays.
Oh, yeah, I don't hear too much about Wrangler, but yeah, those were the days. Those were the days.
Oh, that's adorable. Well, I finished all my questions. So do you have any comments you'd like to say from any past memories you'd like to share?
Well, I just hope that our continued generations enjoy the sport. I know there have been so many changes in the sport. I really would hope that NASCAR would look at the fans, because we are the ones that support and have supported them, and get maybe some input from the fans on what they want to see. Because if we don't buy the tickets and we lose interest, then there's no need for a racetrack. So, I just heard a story about changes that they're going to be making to the Atlanta Motor Speedway. And I didn't research it that much. It was just a little blurb I heard from a driver that was giving his input, because he's a driver, he races that track, and he doesn't want to see the changes. So I don't know where NASCAR is going to go forward. I don't know. I know motorsports is a phenomenal industry. It brought about the competitiveness, I believe, in me as a person, because when you're watching racing, that's such a competitive spirit that's taking place. And I hope that doesn't go away with future generations, because we need that. Have it be drag racing, have it be open wheel, have it be motorcycle. There is a need for motorsports. So it's a great industry, and I hope it continues.
Will you be seeing any shows anytime soon, or are you retiring?
I don't know. I like it was very different that July 4th used to be one of my favorite races. So this was the first year, I believe, that we didn't have a July 4th weekend. It used to be called the Firecracker 400 in my day.
Oh.
And yes, the pre-race was called the Paul Revere 250, and that would be at midnight, the eve of the Firecracker 400. And then on July 4th, they would have the Firecracker 400. And this is the first year, because of I think weather. We used to get a lot of rain out, so they think maybe later in the season is a better opportunity to have this mid-season race. So it was very different not seeing the sports, the trailers at the track, and the sports fans in town. But I hope it works out for them in August. So maybe I'll be catching it on TV, but I don't think I'll be at the track.
You don't want to get sunburnt? That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, no. Right. It's a very big crowd, so it's a little bit, it's a lot different from those fan stands that you see in my paintings. It's a lot different.
Well, where's the best seat, you would think? Is it up top, like the up high where you can see it, or is it up close?
I would say in the middle.
Middle?
In the middle, because if you're too low to the bottom, you only see what's in front of you. If you're way too up to the top, you see more, but it's like going to a concert in the nosebleed section.
Yeah.
No fun. So I think in the middle is good. We always used to be in the middle. It would be perfect.
Those tops scare me because like I'm always afraid someone's gonna fall off, including me. Like I don't want to fall off of that.
I've witnessed many people fall down after partaking in a little bit too much alcoholic beverages,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, especially after a rain situation.
Oh,
Yes, after rain, that would be a bad situation. Rain and alcohol don't mix, and I've seen many people kind of sliding down stairs, and that's bad.
oh. Well, thank you so much for your time, Tracy. I believe
My pleasure.
everything you said, what you need to say.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure speaking to you too. And as one of the younger generation, I hope you catch a NASCAR race soon.
I will maybe get front row seats with the program. Who knows?
You never know.
Well, do you want to introduce yourself and say who you are so we can have a nice closing?
Sure. I am Tracy Franchina Costanza, and I am a big fan of NASCAR. And I am so happy that the Sparks program is in place because it brings new light to our sport to the new generation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tracy.
You're welcome. Take care.
You too. Bye.